They built a killing field with their own hands, thousands of small iron spikes, buried point up in the dirt to shred the legs of charging horses. It was meant to save them. Weeks later, it was the ground their own men would die on, running the wrong way in the dark. This is the Battle of Jalula, and it's the moment Persia's last organized army in Mesopotamia stopped existing. By the spring of 637, the Sassanid Empire was already bleeding out. Ctesiphon, the capital that had governed half the known world, had fallen without a real fight. Its king, Yazdegerd III, was gone before the gates opened, riding east with whatever court and treasury he could carry in a hurry. He wasn't fleeing blindly, though he had a destination in mind, the mountain town of Hulwan, the last gateway between the plains of Mesopotamia and the safety of the Iranian plateau. Reach it, hold it, and the war wasn't over. It was just moving to higher ground, where the empire's wealthiest and most loyal provinces were still waiting, untouched. But Hulwan was still weeks away on foot, and Caliph Umar's commanders had no intention of letting a broken empire simply walk to safety. Somebody had to slow them down, and that job fell to a Persian general named Mihran, a veteran who had already faced this enemy once before, at the catastrophic defeat of Qadisiyah. Standing beside him as his deputy was a man carrying an even heavier weight, Khurazad, brother of Rostam Farrokhzad, the commander who had died leading Persia's army in that same disaster. Whatever mix of duty and revenge brought him to this field, the mission itself was simple. Hold the road at Jalula. By every day possible, die if it comes to that. Mihran did not plan on dying easily. He chose his ground with real skill. A town wedged between a river and the broken foothills of the Zagros Mountains, a natural funnel that would force any attacking force down one narrow front. Then he made the ground itself into a weapon. His engineers dug a deep trench across the entire approach and scattered in the open field ahead of it thousands of small iron caltrops, three-pronged spikes that always land with one point facing up. No horse crosses that ground at a run. No infantry line holds formation walking through it either. A single bridge crossed the trench, tucked toward the rear of the position, meant only for Persian use. When the Arab commander Hashim ibn Utbah arrived with roughly 12,000 men, he understood exactly what he was looking at. This wasn't a battlefield in any normal sense. It was a fortress built from dirt and iron, and a straight charge into it would have been suicide. For a stretch of time, the two armies simply faced each other across that killing ground, either side finding a way to force the issue without paying a terrible price for it. Hashim wasn't planning to force it head-on at all. Beside him waited a cavalry officer named Kaka ibn Amr, a man who had already turned one battle around with a single reckless ride into the chaos of Qadisiyah. Between them, Hashim and Kaka built a plan with two moving parts, and it's the second part that most retellings of this battle leave out entirely. The first part was bait. Hashim's front line advanced, engaged the Persian defenders, and then began pulling back, as if breaking under pressure. It's one of the riskiest maneuvers in ancient warfare, because a fake retreat can turn into a real one in seconds if the men executing it lose their nerve, or if the enemy presses too hard, too fast. Mihran's army, sensing a real chance to finally punch through after a standoff that had cost them nothing, pushed forward off their defended line and out into open ground to run the retreating Arabs down. That's the moment most versions of this story call the turning point. It isn't. The real turning point was happening somewhere the Persians weren't watching, while their attention stayed locked on the retreating line ahead of them. Kaka had already swung his cavalry wide around the Persian flank, circling behind the entire position toward the one lightly guarded, crossing over their own trench, the bridge, the single way back inside their own defenses. He took it, only then did Hashim's line stop retreating and turn to fight. The Persian army, pulled out of its fortress and now facing a full frontal assault, tried to do the only sensible thing left to them, fall back to the trench and hold there again, and found the bridge gone. Their own defenses, built to keep an enemy out, were now sealed shut from the inside. The trench and its iron thorns behind them, an advancing army in front. and no clean way through either direction. What followed was not really a battle anymore. It was a collapse. Trapped between Hashim's infantry and the barrier they had spent weeks turning into a weapon, the Persian line broke apart in the open ground. Khurazad, brother of the man who had died at Qadisiyah, did not survive the field. Thousands of his men never made it back across their own trench at all. Horses screamed and went down in the dirt, riders were thrown, and men pressed backward into ground seeded with their own spikes. Because there was nowhere else left to run, Mihran himself escaped the chaos, along with a portion of his shattered force, retreating into the fortified town of Jalula itself. Hashim didn't storm it. He didn't need to. He surrounded it instead and settled in for a siege that would grind on for 7 long months before the garrison finally surrendered under terms of tribute, a slow, quiet epilogue to a battle that had actually been decided in a single afternoon. Mihran wasn't quite finished. He rallied what survivors he could and pulled back further, toward the town of Kanakin, hoping for reinforcements out of Hulwan. Quaka caught up with him there, and according to the accounts, killed him in single combat, closing the book on the man who had built the most sophisticated defense the Arabs had faced yet in this entire war. When word of Mihran's death reached Yazdegerd at Hulwan, he didn't wait to find out whether the mountain gateway could actually hold. He fled again, deeper into Persia through Qom and eventually toward Ray, still searching for a piece of ground the war hadn't caught up to yet. It never really came. 4 years later, he would gamble everything on one final army. Over 100,000 men gathered at a place called Nahavand for a last stand that would end almost exactly the way Jalula had. There's something worth sitting with in how Jalula actually ended. Once you strip away the simpler version of this story, Mihran didn't lose because his defenses failed. His trench held. His caltrops worked exactly as designed. He lost because, for one dangerous moment, the men guarding a trap forgot it could be sprung from behind just as easily as from the front. The ground he built to save his army became the wall that sealed it in. And somewhere east of Jalula, a king kept running from a war that had already, in every way that mattered, been decided.